I'd like to introduce David Round, who is the Managing Director of Evion.
Thank you, and thank you to the conveners of the conference. It's much, we highly appreciate the opportunity to speak. And I must firstly acknowledge the Ambassador to Mauritius and Madagascar. It's nice to see her in the audience. It's lovely to see Olivia here from Madagascar. It's also wonderful to see some of my team from Madagascar, including Lydia and Laurent. So welcome again to Perth. I know this isn't your first trip, Lydia, but it's wonderful to see you here. In relation to Evion, we've just slipped forward a bit there. Just go back a couple there, please. There we go. Okay. I don't think everyone needs me to read the disclaimer page. Okay. Evion went through a little bit of a restructure a few months ago. There's a corporate snapshot of our key people. Heather Zampatti's been with the board for a number of years, very experienced corporate advisor and chairperson in Australia, and we're delighted to have Heather on board. Warwick and Craig Lennon, Warwick Hazelden and Craig Lennon, very experienced mining, investor relations, CFO operators in the mining sector in Australia. So we're delighted to have them join the board over the last few months. They're joining the board is really about the transition of the company from an explorer to hopefully in the short term a developer and doing a lot of other good things in the world. I think we just need to slip down a couple more. Where are my teenage kids when we need them? Thanks. Next slide, please. Thanks. The Evion business model is something we structured a few years ago, and when we talked about and we looked at establishing a presence in graphite over the last 6 or 7 years, we deliberately looked at, well, do we want to be just a graphite concentrate producer, as there are a lot of aspiring graphite producers around the world. There are a number in Australia, there are a number, as we know, in Africa. But we thought, well, let's do this cleverly. Let's look at downstream operations. And let's look at where can we provide our material to other operations in the world, and we can have an investment in those operations that'll potentially provide a wonderful opportunity and better return for shareholders. So over the last couple of years, we've looked at and we've developed an operation in India for our expandable graphite operation in India with a well-known group, Medichem Chemicals, who have been producing expandable graphite in India for about 20 or 30 years. So we formed a joint venture with them 3 years ago. I was pleasingly in India a few months ago to see them complete construction, complete development, and now into production. So our plan with our operations in Madagascar, around up to sort of 10 to 15% of our production will go into that site for further processing and then selling into Europe. We haven't got obviously our Mannery operation working yet to supply that Medichem operation or PGT operation in India, but pleasingly we are still buying concentrate from Madagascar. Coming from various sources in Madagascar, going into India to produce expandable graphite for mainly sale into Europe. There's a massive demand for expandable graphite into Europe. We've seen with some export controls bans from China over the last few months that there's a number of opportunities presenting themselves. There's certainly extensive demand that we've encountered from the USA, Japan, and Europe for expandable graphite and downstream products. So I guess what I'm looking at now doing, and we've made some public statements around this, and I'm pleasingly going to India next week, we're going to have a talk with our local operators about looking at a plan to double production. So we can look at doubling production and meeting the supply, or demand, should I say, for our material worldwide, which is a great opportunity for us. The other part of our operation for graphite mining and concentrate, the flake graphite, is to take finer flake material and provide for the battery anode material sector. Obviously, that's a big part of our operation. Around 50% of our material and production would go into battery anode material. Again, we've had a scoping study done over the last couple of years to look at an opportunity and how cost effective that is. We produced a scoping study around 18 months ago that demonstrated, done with Dorfner Answer and Wave International, demonstrated a really strong business case for Madagascan fines graphite to go into a battery anode plant operation. Our material's been tested by Dorfner Answer, also by Bigram in China. Now, people who understand the critical minerals sector and the graphite sector understand they're world-leading testers, and they validated our graphite and generally Madagascar's graphite as some of the best material available for use in the battery anode material market. So that's a little bit about our operation. We're not just a concentrate producer. A lot of our material will go into expandable graphite operations, and we propose some of the material we sold as concentrate. The balance would go into a BAM plant operation, which I'll come to a little further. Next, please. A little bit about graphite and the market generally, in the graphite market. As a lot of people may have known, China made some announcements around December last year about some bans on graphite exports, not just concentrate, but obviously various other forms of downstream processed material, specifically to certain countries around the world, which I won't go into now, but the very public information about that. So, look, that has presented us, Madagascar, and various other parts of Africa with an enormous commercial opportunity. It's an opportunity we need to move forward with now. There's extensive demand for graphite and downstream processed materials from Europe, USA, other parts of Asia, and particular into India. I've previously sold a lot of product and material into India. It's no secret it's a burgeoning market. It's a massive population. There's a lot of opportunities for Australian and African based companies to work with Indian operations. A little bit about our Mannery operation. Couple down, please. We published next one, please. We published our definitive feasibility study, which was completed at the end of 2022. We had a very experienced project manager in Mick Ryan prepare a lot of the work and did a wonderful job. He's done a lot of work in Madagascar, worked with Ambertovia in Madagascar. We had world-leading consultants that worked with us in preparing our DFS, and we had a lot of independent advice, even down to the modelling. It was largely done independently. It produced a very strong set of numbers, which I'm proud to talk about. We've got a very large reserve. We've got a significant resource available, which can be extended substantially. We've only really tested around 50 to 20% of our exploration target. So that reserve and resource could be expanded significantly as required in the early stages of our operation. Our DFS is really robust, financial model. We've produced and published and lodged with the Office of Environment in Madagascar, our Environmental and Social Impact Assessment, which we're now fine-tuning into a plan. We're working through the process now of finalising permit and licensing applications so that our exploration tenements can be converted into exploitation or mining and development. And I'm delighted to see the recent media produced by the government of Madagascar about their priorities in working with us and our other Australian colleagues in helping us develop our projects. Project finance, we've got some wonderful advisors in relation to project financing around debt and equity. That's something we'll work toward fast-tracking very quickly as we have line and sight around licensing. Around offtake, it's always a discussion that I get thrown at a lot around offtake partners, and my advice has always been, and having prepared a number of offtake agreements over the past, is don't rush out to sell your soul to the first party who wants to do an offtake agreement with you. If you've got a good project, you've got good material, you've got financial backers, you will find the right offtake partners that suit your business plan. We've got offtake partners to sell our expandable graphite, which was the right time to have that done. We also have a number of very strong inquiries for for offtake for our concentrate and potential BAM material, but we're in no rush to sign ourselves up to groups that may not be. We want to find the right group that's aligned with our strategic plan, if that makes sense, and it's very important. Manaree's location is on the next map, please. In a growing and developing area. You'll see on that slide the map of Madagascar, a little bit south from where our friends are at Akora. We're in the southern corridor, and importantly, people look at that area of Madagascar, and I fortunately have been to Madagascar 16 times over the last 6 or 7 years, so I've got to know Mada very well and certainly see its potential. The region where we're located in the south of Madagascar, importantly, we're not there testing and learning a lot of new ground. A lot of work has been done in the region. Pleasingly, and to our benefit in many respects, there's a project right next door to us, the Molo graphite mine, owned by Nexsource Resources, listed on the Canadian exchange, market cap of around 200 million Canadian dollars. So we talk with our friends at Nexsource regularly. We have a vested interest. We have common interest in seeing the region developed. We're doing a lot of good things that they have done over the years. So we believe with our market cap of around 10 million, there's a 200. I like to think we're a little bit undervalued. I think we've got a fair bit of upside as far as our development goes over the next few years. Pleasingly, I've made an announcement a few months ago when I was in Madagascar in July that we managed to recruit a couple of old colleagues of mine I worked with previously, Lydia Bolzara, who's with us at the moment, and Laurent. I'd worked with them previously in Madagascar, and Lydia has done extensive work in helping Nexsource, one of our peers, from explorer to developer to miner. So she's now working with us in that capacity. I've got the utmost faith. We've got a very competent, capable team in Madagascar, which I'm delighted about. Next slide, please. My colleagues touch on some of the other groups in Madagascar. It's a resource-rich country. As I mentioned, I've been going in and out of Madagascar now for about 8 years. I first went in 2016, and it struck me the potential the country has, not only in relation to its vast mineral resources, but the talent of the individuals and people in Madagascar. I had the pleasure of dealing with a lot of junior finance people, a lot of geologists, a lot of engineers, and I was incredibly impressed by the talent and education standards of a lot of people in Madagascar. So we work very, very hard, and I'm a great believer in building the right team, and if you have the right team, you generally get the right outcome in most things in life. So we've focused on building the right team at the right time. We've got some very good people coming into the company over the next few years. As an example, we took a young aspiring geologist from Madagascar a few years ago, and he came over to Perth to start a geology degree, and I know a few friends are giggling at the moment. Roberto is his name, and he finished his geology degree a year or two ago and said, "David, I've done so well here, now they want me to do my Masters." And I said, "That's fine, great, we'll sponsor you to do your Masters." Another year went by, and he came along and said, "Well, I've finished my Masters, and now I've got a scholarship to do a PhD at Curtin." I thought, "That's fantastic, Roberto, but I do want you to go back to Madagascar one day and do some work. You're a great ambassador to Madagascar. Your education is outstanding." And it's just a great example of a young Malagasy guy who's come out to Australia, he's educated himself, and he'll be a big credit to the economy and hopefully our company over the next 10 to 20 years. Next slide, please. Where we are at in the life cycle of Evion. We've done a lot of work in the last 5 or 6 years in completing our drilling, resource and reserve estimation and publication. We've done a substantial DFS, as I've mentioned, with a really strong business case. We're in the process now of completing environmental safety, ESIP, and also a relocation action plan. We're working very closely with the local community. Being part of the local community is really, really important, very important to us. They're not just words. We will employ around 300 people locally when our operation commences. That's directly, indirectly, probably much, much more. Our commitment to Madagascar is to the extent that we would probably only employ 4 to 6 expats. and their expats will be engaged with a brief to train and mentor and help local people. So our commitment is really about employing local people and training them and educating them. And from my experience in working previously in Madagascar with a previous group and developing people, is that a lot of the young people there, men and boys, men and women, they're delighted to learn and train, and they're very, very capable, and very, very capable geologists, engineers, finance professionals, and it's great to have that impact on society. So in the short term, what we're looking at finalising is obviously permitting. We're delighted to see the information coming out from the government over the last few months about their commitment to working with companies such as ours. This will allow us to move forward with some really serious discussions with offtake partners and our other plans that we've got. I've also had some discussions, and I was going to mention this to the Mines Minister tomorrow, but I might let it out of the bag a little bit now, that our scoping study for the battery anode material plant, we were looking at putting that into Europe. And we thought, and we looked at that, and it was a very strong business case. But over the last few months, we thought, well, the most logical place to put an anode plant is in Madagascar for logistical and commercial and lots of other good reasons. So we will probably most likely commence a study over the next few months to look at a BAM plant. I know the location in Madagascar that I think would be preferable. It makes a lot of commercial sense. So that's something I delight in having a discussion with the Mines Minister and other people within the short term. So we're very optimistic about the next steps. We're very optimistic the next steps for the next few 6 to 9 months for the company will be very strong. Next, please. Madagascar's got a long history of mining and development. It first struck me when I first started working in Madagascar, and over the last 5 years I've got to know a lot of people who've been importing graphite from Madagascar into Europe and into the USA in particular. And there's two particular groups in the USA and in Europe that I met over the last 5 or 6 years, and they both talk about their family businesses having imported graphite from Madagascar for 50, 60, 70, 80 years. So Madagascar's operations and graphite production is well known around the world. It's a wonderful location for graphite mining. There are many of the benefits there that I've outlined about why we should work in Madagascar. Next, please. Some of our short-term activities, and these are really important points to note, and I've discussed on them, referenced a few of them. The appointment of Lydia was wonderful, the government's commitment to working with us about the development of mining projects and building and employing a lot of people and operating, that's very important to us. Just as importantly, and I've touched on this previously, we were invited by the EU, some officials in Madagascar from the EU a few months ago to submit a grant application under their Critical Resource Raw Materials Act. We lodged that application a couple of weeks ago. I like to think we tick all the boxes. We've got a really strong business case for support from that piece of grant funding, which helps with project development and offtake partner funding. So it's I'm going to progress that fairly hard over the next few months, and we look forward to that. A little bit, whilst we're focused on wonderful parts of Africa and Madagascar in particular, I'll just touch on our operation in India very quickly. Next page, please. Next couple of pages, thanks. So our joint venture in India, Panthera Graphite Technologies, our 50-50 JV with Medichem. We've spent a couple of years building that site. We've probably spent collectively the JV about $4.8 million US. Its economics are very strong. The expandable graphite, and I made an announcement about this recently, expandable graphite selling around the sort of $3,000 to $4,000 US a tonne. We're buying material before processing it in the sort of $1,200 to $1,300 a tonne, and there's some processing costs on that. So economic modelling for that site, it's very strong. There's most of the expandable graphite up until now has been produced in China. We've broken into that market, which we're delighted about. We're one of the few producers. We're certainly the only producer of expandable graphite on the ASX. One of the few producers outside of China that's actually producing expandable graphite. If I just go to the next page, please, on that. The technology that our Indian partners have brought to our operation has been fantastic. You can see there that the financial numbers are pretty impressive. I'm going into India, as I mentioned, next week with our buyers from Europe who'll be attending a couple of meetings there. They've expressed very strong demand, and they're very anxious for us to increase production to meet, strong sales demand mainly into Europe, but certainly there's strong demand from other parts of Asia and the USA as well. So it's a strong business case. We've built it. I'm very proud of this operation. We've done it with a very highly reputable, experienced group in India, and it's working very well. Next couple of slides, thanks. Probably the next one onto our BAM plan operation. And the next one, thanks. I guess while I've always been excited about the opportunity for a battery anode project is this graph, which I know has been published over the last few years quite a bit. It talks about, and it was published by Benchmark, and there's been various iterations and examples of this over the last few years, but this is Benchmark's projection of European gigafactories over the next decade. There's a lot. They need BAM material. They need graphite. There's very little graphite produced in Europe. There's a small operation, one or two small operations in Eastern Europe, but there's very little production. So most graphite must come from Madagascar, other parts of Africa. China may or may not export into Europe. So the demand for material for the gigafactories in Europe is there. There's a significant demand. We're well timed to produce material for that market. Next, thanks. And probably the next one after that, thank you. Our battery anode material project, as I mentioned, we went through a substantial scoping study with Wave International and Dorfner Anzaplan. It produced that's a flow chart of the operation, if you like, of how CSPG is produced into the market. Obviously, there's a very strong demand for material going forward. There's been a multitude of presentations and graphs, and Benchmark and Fast Markets have produced a lot of literature over the last few months, evidencing that there's a significant demand for battery anode material over the next decade to fuel the demand for EVs. There's been a little bit of negative press about the uptake of EVs in Australia, but Australia's market for EV is a fraction of the world market. I've travelled a fair bit over the last few years into India, Europe, and the USA, and there are substantial numbers of EVs on the roads over there. So I just think the demand for EVs will grow. There will be some bubbles along the way, but I think the technology will improve, prices will improve, the uptake will improve, and there'll be substantial demand for battery anode material. Of course, as we've often talked about, there is more graphite in a lithium-ion battery than any other material, so there really is a strong demand for graphite. The next slide, please. That were the results of our scoping study that we undertook. As I mentioned earlier, we're going to morph this with a development partner that we've nominated. Very important to if you aspire to produce battery anode material for lithium-ion batteries, is that you have a development partner that knows what they're doing. We've got a couple of good, very strong relationships with one in particular. That's ongoing, discussions ongoing about how we work together. I would love to look at how we could develop this sort of project on the west coast of Madagascar. It just makes lots of commercial sense. As our colleagues have mentioned, Madagascar is very well located from a freight and logistics perspective for trade into Europe or into Asia. Next slide, please. As far as our project and how we do things within Evion, we're ESG compliant to the extent that we've been assessed by Digby. We had a very high rating from Digby. We've been reassessed over the last year and achieved a double B plus rating, which is a very high rating. We're pleased with that. We do a lot of community work in Madagascar. As far as our employment, we've got a very strong focus on diversity engagement. We employ and train a lot of people. I'm very proud of that. We do a lot of community work in Madagascar. We've built schools. We want to build health centres. We're committed to providing extensive employment in the region. We believe we can add a lot of value to the area we propose to develop. Next slide, please. So I guess in wrapping up, we've got a lot of things happening over the balance of this year. It's flying by, but there's still a few months to go. We've got growth in India, which is really being fueled by concentrate from Madagascar, ironically. And hopefully over time, our own graphite from our own mines will be fueling a part of our fueling our expandable graphite operations in India. We want to make a final investment decision on Mannery, which, after approval of our ESIA and relocation action plans, licensing and permitting, we'll work very closely with the government and doing everything we need to do to conclude that. Also, our development of our BAM plant, which I've talked about. We want to conclude a pre-feasibility study around that and develop some commercial plans. So we've got the complete downstream process package, if you like, from being a concentrate producer that provides a lot of the concentrate into our own facilities that we partly own, which is important to us. So on that basis, I just want to finish with one final comment about the opportunity for Madagascar. As I've been saying for a few times, having been there now over the last 7 or 8 years, it has enormous opportunity. It has enormous opportunity to be the world leader in graphite production over the next decade. There is other, with outside of China and other parts of Africa, Madagascar is well located, it's well resourced with exceptionally talented people. It's wonderful to see the government now behind the industry in Madagascar. I'm really excited about the next decade. Madagascar can be the biggest graphite producer in the world. Thank you very much.